Hello, my name is Chris Cade, and today I am so grateful to introduce to you Cindy Ann Olson. She is somebody who was introduced through a mutual friend of mine, Tim Tarango, and what I've come to really love about Cindy and her work is that she helps people figure out how to get pain-free, how to let go of fatigue using natural methods. And they're rooted in science. They're grounded, they're practical, they're step-by-step things that actually work in people's lives. And I think this is important because it can be very easy to be lost in the alternative health space and miss out on the gems that are scientifically proven that actually work while we get carried away with things that don't work. And sifting through the fact from the fiction is something that Cindy has devoted her life to. So Cindy, thank you so much for being here. I would love to hear, how did you go from, early on in life where you were in tremendous pain, as I understand it, to now being pain-free without meds? Because most people would dream of being without meds. And I don't know how you actually managed to do that.
Well, first of all, I'm so excited to be here. And thank you so much, Chris. I'm glad that I've met you. I love your work.
Thank you.
Well, my journey has been a long one. I started out getting migraines when I was 7 years old, and that has to do with the fact I have a neurological disorder. Mm-hmm. And over the years, I've been very private because I thought, well, I'm going on my own health journey. No one would be particularly interested in that. And I actually held down a very difficult job on Wall Street for many, many years when I was the only woman in an office of 150 men. Wow. Basically, I was able to do that simply because when I was in college, I made a decision that I was on painkiller after painkiller, and that was the only thing they could do for my disorder, CMT. Wow. And otherwise, they said, listen, Cindy, you can live on disability, and eventually, in a couple of years, you'll go into a wheelchair, and then after that, and I saw relatives go through that. My mother went down to 80 pounds before she died after, 5 different back operations and many other operations for other, working on her nervous system, basically. And it never really worked. So I had a lot of motivation to spend hours and hours as a guinea pig, for the lack of a better term, right. Learning biofeedback when the actual computers that needed to do that were the size of a room. This is back in the early 80s. And I really thought by this time in medical history, every office would have a biofeedback machine.
Right.
Because everyone needs to learn how their body works. And obviously that has not happened.
Right.
Western medicine has basically taken the tack that if it doesn't work with a medication, then we'll give you surgery.
Right.
Those are my only options. And I said no to that. And what's exciting is some of the ancient wisdom is absolutely true. And I went back and I learned traditions, and I was able to travel around the world and really participate with all sorts of spiritual traditions, but also medical traditions. Some of it, I obviously with my Western mind couldn't get, my head around, but with my financial and scientific background, I was able to, over the years, amass incredible amounts of information. And as I said, I was doing it for myself because I wanted to continue to walk. I wanted to continue to be able to use my hands. I had a lot of motivation for that.
What was it like being in that much pain? I mean, obviously you were really motivated, but what was your daily experience like before you learned what you know now?
Well, for example, if you're in a migraine situation, which is a neurological disorder, they finally figured that out. I could have told them that a long time ago. But anyways, it's obviously very individual. Mm-hmm. That's the thing you have to understand about pain. Your pain, yes, we can give you a pain scale, we can sort of understand if someone is squinting and upset that yes, they're experiencing pain.
Mhm.
But, I know about 200 different words that can describe different kinds of pain. And if someone says they have that kind of pain, then I will give them a different suggestion than I would for someone, for example, if you have throbbing pain, you do something different than if you have stabbing pain.
Right, and I would never have thought of that. I've had one migraine in my life. I get headaches probably a few times a month, mostly from not sleeping well. Or no, not actually, that's not true. Mostly kind of vision headaches, usually from working behind the computer a lot, right? So I get the ones that kind of wrap around and come, in front of my eyes. But I had never thought about the idea that there's my alarm telling me I normally pick up from school today, but I actually have a day off today. He's going off on adventure. So I had never really thought about the idea that a headache, I just call it a headache, right? That different kinds of pain in my head could be representing different issues and have different sources and therefore different remedies. I honestly, just in talking this right now, like when I have a headache, I take one of two courses of action. If it is during the daytime and I know I need to be functioning, or if it's at night and I know I won't be able to sleep, I take Tylenol. I do the medical, the conventional medical thing. Or if I feel like I will be able to go to sleep, then I'll go to sleep. But that's because I don't know any different. I love natural healing methods, but these are things that are kind of foreign to me, is the idea that, in my case, something that feels incapacitating
Right.
can actually be healed naturally. So I really love what you're up to, and I'm really curious more about this idea of different pains and different sources of the pain and different remedies for them.
Right. Well, first of all, most people don't understand that pain is a signal. Pain is actually life-saving.
Mm-hmm.
When my body was, experiencing this, it was telling me that I had to pay attention.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Yeah.
But when I was experiencing, when I was very young, the migraines that I had all sorts of nausea with, and I would throw up, and I would have all sorts of visual manifestations that I would want to like lay under a blanket, and rock back and forth. I mean, if they asked me if it was a 10, I would have said absolutely. And my entire body got involved. It wasn't just in my head. But I was thought of as a shirker in my family, even though my mother would, basically lay down periodically and not get up for 5 days because she had the same situation. But she needed me to fill in when she was down. So I had to overcome it. And she didn't really believe in taking medication. They finally took me to the doctor and he gave me some medication. Mm-hmm. But as I said, by the time I was in my 20s, I had taken every medication and they no longer worked. I would actually get something called rebound headaches. So even if I wasn't having a migraine, I would get a headache because it was basically from taking too much medication.
Got it.
So I finally said, okay, what is pain? That was my first question. I didn't even know what it was. So I basically had to learn what pain was. Now, they had the gateway theory of pain that was very popular, and they've been trying to make it true for a very long time, that it's all to do with what your nerves are. And if a nerve is actually touched or something like that, then you're going to feel pain, and there's nothing you can do about it.
Okay.
I learned what was happening before I experienced a headache or some other body pain.
Okay.
I also realized that for my back, for example, if I was picking or moving in a different way that was healthy for me, my pain was actually letting me know something that I needed to stop doing that.
Got it.
I've always loved to garden. And sometimes, if I'm digging something, I'm going to get that plant in and, and the problem is that repetitive kind of motion, if I'm not careful with, then something goes out of alignment and then there's some difficulty from that.
Right.
So what I learned was, okay, now this is information. It's not something to be feared. Say a doctor comes to you and says, I'm going to give you an injection, and you see that long needle. Okay? I don't think they're as long as they used to be, but anyways,
Right.
they were thick and long, okay? I got all these long needles.
Yeah.
And, I would tense up. My entire body would have a biological reaction,
Yeah.
right? And it was from the fear that I was going to be stuck. Well, guess what? That creates more pain.
Right.
So one of the things I learned was, I don't know if you can see this, but
Yeah.
I basically just by mistake one day put my hand out, and then I touched my finger to the top. I don't remember exactly why this happened, but I realized that I was causing myself pain. And I said, wow, I gotta, what does that mean? And then when I relaxed my hand and did the same motion, there was no pain. So the next time I went into the doctor to get an injection, I basically said, I'm just going to relax. Like, totally, I'm not going to pay attention. And there was so much less pain.
Yeah.
I said, wait a minute. So my body's reaction to something has a lot to do with pain.
Okay. Right.
And my experience of it. So then I made this breakthrough. I said, pain is malleable, right?
Right.
It's still the same action, but my reaction and my feeling about it, my emotions are totally different. And that is what, when you are fearing a headache coming on, you increase the headache. If you take the fear away,
got it.
You have less headache. So why do you want to do face massage, right? When you're having a headache.
Right.
Yes, it'll have you less tighten your muscles, right? And many tension headaches are from the fact that your entire head, believe it or not, has muscles that you can then relax.
Right.
And especially around your eyes.
Yeah, I notice if I'm having a headache, I'm,
Yeah.
doing this and this.
Right.
Yeah.
And, but you can't kind of do it, oh yeah, well that seems to make sense or whatever. You have to be more intentional about it in order to have it really actually help.
Because different pain is caused from different, got it. Okay, I'm starting to put it together, I'm coming along for the ride. I'm getting
it. So the other thing is, so I have some water here, right?
Yeah.
And hydration, believe it or not, is an incredible part of pain.
Mm-hmm.
Now, we're mostly water.
Right. Like 80% or something. I don't know what the math is, but.
Well, they come up with different numbers periodically, and I think that's because different people are tested, okay?
Fair enough, yep.
But basically, a pain will be greater, I noticed, if I wasn't hydrated.
Interesting, okay.
Okay? The other thing is, how many of us really pay attention to breathing? Now we know
I've forgotten for the last 10 minutes.
Now we know that monks and other people that are doing mindful exercises and yoga, that's one of the things, yogic breathing. There are so many books on it, and there's so many different styles of breathing. I can rattle off a couple hundred right now.
Yep.
But the point is not know how much you know about breathing. It's the fact that when you start to be in pain, you can breathe. Now, if you go into a hospital, an emergency room, okay, and you're all upset, one of the first things nurses will come over and say, breathe in your nose and out your mouth.
Right.
Okay? Because that will at least make you conscious of breathing.
Right.
And it's also really interesting when you're conscious of your breath, right? You then start to breathe more. And when you breathe more, that's actually going to help your body, instead of going into a stress situation, which pain usually leads to.
Right.
It'll go into a more relaxed situation.
Got it. So I want to jump in here for a minute, because one of the things I talk about kind of in general when I'm writing and teaching and things like that is, it's one thing to hear concepts and to understand like, oh, that makes sense. And it works, in most situations. But what I kind of liken it to, and I'll use an emotional pain metaphor here rather than a physical one, is emotionally we have different, degrees of pain in our life. There is the I'm disappointed, I'm sad, frustrated, kind of low level. Of course, even something like this, deep breathing and relaxing, can dissolve that pretty easily. Then we get into things that are like heartbreak. I got broken up with, a relationship ended. And in those cases, we end up going a little further. Deep breathing, it'll help, but there's usually more that needs to be done for us to feel whole again. Then we can go further down that rabbit hole to death, grief, the things that are really painful but manageable. And again, deep breathing, it'll help us in the moment, but it usually won't help us get past that grief. And then there's the extreme. There's the dark night of the soul. This is the stuff where you wouldn't wish it even upon your worst enemies, if you have any, or even think that way. You wouldn't wish it upon the perpetrators. You wouldn't wish it upon anybody in the world, because it's just that bad, right? I think of minor aches and pains as that very first kind of thing we talked about. It's just like, oh, disappointment, pain, frustration. I think of migraines as being in the scale of, death, grief, and that kind of thing. And then the kind of pain that some people deal with, where it's beyond a migraine, just completely incapacitating, is like that dark night of the soul. That's kind of the way I think of a continuum, comparing emotional pain and physical pain. So what I want to know is, there's some people in our community who are in so much pain that they're going to look at you and say, so you want me to drink water and breathe deeply? Like, really, I've done that. That doesn't help. What do you got for me? Like, bring it to me. I'm taking all the medications. I'm doing everything my doctors say. I'm doing my naturopath. I'm doing my chiropractic. I'm doing my acupuncture. I'm doing everything I can, and I'm in pain. What about them?
Well, in some way, that's exactly where I was. Mm-hmm. And that's why I went and I learned a lot about my body through biofeedback. Okay. And what that made me realize was there's quite a few things going on, and they're all interrelated. So emotional pain, they're now figuring out, like in Japan, they realize that if someone has a heartbreak, that their heart is actually, and they have a Japanese term for them, I can't remember at the moment, but they actually have a term that it actually hurts the heart and it causes like a little baby heart attack.
Wow. I didn't know that.
And there's been a lot of experimentation and documentation of that. So I don't know, maybe the Japanese have a stronger emotional responses to things than other countries, or maybe we're just all ignoring it. I don't know.
Could be a little bit of both. I know a lot of us ignore the pain signals because, at least in Western culture, you got to keep going. You got to work. You got to, like you had to take care of your mother. Like, you couldn't stop. It wasn't an option for many.
It wasn't.
Yeah.
And for men, it's even worse, because men are basically told, you're not supposed to feel that. Don't cry. Don't, be a man, et cetera, et cetera. And you tell this to a little boy. Right? So girls have it a little bit easier, but we also have to deal with menstruation. And man, my periods, when I was experiencing it, they were awful.
I've known females who have said that, but I personally cannot relate.
Really, really awful. Yeah. So the point was, I recognized when that was going on that I had a cycle of hormones that were ruling my life. Mm-hmm. So I said, I got to learn a lot about this so that I can then intervene, all right, and figure out how I can control that myself.
Got it.
And I wasn't going to go to the mountaintop, because I had people telling me I had to go to a mountaintop and do this for 30 years, and I wasn't willing to do that.
Right.
All right. But I did read a book, Laughter's the Best Medicine. I said, he's onto something.
Okay.
Right? What does laughter do? Laughter creates endorphins, right? Our own natural painkillers.
Got it.
And our endorphins, right, then raise our serotonin levels, all right? So we can start to take a little bit of control. So part of the pain practice, processing practice that I have is that I have people kind of go through a period of noticing what's going on in their life, and then learning how to do self-observation. Mm-hmm. It seems that it would be easy to observe your body and your emotions and all these various things, but there's a lot of interaction here.
Yeah, no,
right?
it's
you also have to notice what's going on the outside, right?
Right.
So you got headaches from using your computer.
Yeah.
I use the computer a lot more than I would like.
Right.
But, this is part of life, and we have to make adjustments. But as soon as I feel like my eyes are getting dry,
Mm-hmm.
and I recognize, aha, something is going to happen, then I get up, right? I rinse off my face.
Mm-hmm.
I am pain-free because I know all the precursors to what my pain is.
Got it. So if I were to really oversimplify, it sounds like there's kind of two more or less basic parts to pain management. One is when you're actually in the pain, what are the things you have to do to get out of pain? But the other thing is, how do you develop, self-awareness so that as the pain signals are happening, you can actually counteract them before they become amplified, before they become pain.
Exactly.
Okay.
Now, there's certain situations, all right? Mm-hmm. If you are in a surfing accident, okay, because I live by Venice Beach.
Right.
You're going to want to have Western medicine come stabilize you, take you to the hospital. And at that point, that's acute pain. All right. That's not giving you any more information. You broke your leg. You broke your leg.
Right. Yeah.
Okay. I'm not suggesting to you, you're going to breathe out of that.
Right.
Okay. I'm not suggesting you can use acupuncture out of that.
Right.
I'm not suggesting that you're going to be able to change, all your endorphins, right? That you are basically going to be able to, no, that's acute pain. Take a painkiller.
Right.
Okay? I'm talking about chronic situations.
Yeah.
If you're in chronic pain, then something is wrong. Right?
Yeah, exactly.
And there's going to be an emotional part of this. There's going to be a psychological part of this. Because if you're in chronic pain, you're going to be depressed. I don't care.
Right. That's a good point. Yeah, a lot of people don't acknowledge the emotional impact that pain has on them. And what you're talking about is perpetuating the pain cycle. Because then, as you were saying, if we tense up, like before that shot you were talking about, mm-hmm. It's going to hurt more. And then next time we're going to be even more scared.
Exactly.
It sounds like similarly, if we're in pain, the more that we dive into feeling that pain, and instead of relaxing and cutting off the pain signals, it just keeps spiraling out of control.
Exactly. So then I say you're in a pain cycle.
Okay.
And there's something interesting that humans have. We have our patterns of activity in our brain, mm-hmm. right? They're called neural pathways. The science has really proven, this works. But I understood that if I kept doing exactly the same thing when I had pain happen, mm-hmm. right, then that wasn't going to help me. I had to learn something new. I had to create a new...
I want to interrupt for a minute. Sorry to interrupt. It's just an aha moment. So, in the body of work, I talk about the neurons that fire together, wire together. So it sounds like what you're saying is, we get in a habit. This is what I do when I get pain. It reinforces that. We keep doing that same thing to reinforce the pain. But what it sounds like you're leading into is a possibility that we could rewire and have a different habit when we get pain. So the new habit could be the same thing every time, but takes us away from pain, or are you going somewhere else with that? I'm curious.
Exactly. So in other words, when we're in pain, mm-hmm. right? Chronic pain, you keep rolling down the same path, right? In the car.
Yeah.
You create ruts because you're only going to go there. What I'm saying is I want to turn and go to the beach. I don't want to go to the swamp, right? The swamp is the pain. I want to go to the beach and go hang out.
Right.
So the way I did that was really by saying, what am I thinking about? What am I feeling? And what the emotion is. So all of those are interrelated.
Got it.
Thoughts, feelings, and emotions. And it can go in any direction. So what you think about, right, can create a feeling, or a feeling can create a thought, right? And both of those can lead to emotions. Or the emotion can create certain thoughts and certain feelings.
Right.
Right? So when you're aware of those, you can say, aha, what am I doing, in my physical life? Is it every time that I see the color red? Because I actually was in a support group with someone who was totally triggered right? And got a headache whenever she saw red because something terrible in her past happened and someone was wearing red.
Got it.
Okay? Now, that's part of our unconscious, right? Most of our neural pathways. Now, it's great when we're driving a car because we can do what? We can drive without really thinking.
Right.
We know where the brake is. We know where everything is. This is fantastic. We don't have to get up every day and relearn things.
Or even breathing, right?
Right.
We can do it consciously, but we won't die if we stop,
Right.
thinking about it.
And I don't have to think about drinking water, right? I know how to drink. So there's lots of things, but the problem is when it comes to pain, we have certain ways that we're taught to deal with pain.
Yeah, I just grab the Tylenol. I'm good.
Right.
Right.
From when you were young.
Yeah.
If your mother says, "Oh, look at, honey, you fell," and you know that you're going to get attention because you fell.
Right.
You're going to have other reasons to have pain than you are if you didn't get any attention at all.
Right.
So a lot of the way that we have our neural pathways put in is when we're obviously before 6 years old.
Right. Yeah, when the brain is most malleable.
Exactly. So we've learned how to deal with pain, absolutely, by the time we're 6.
Got it.
Now, are we given any alternatives? If mom says, take an aspirin, you take an aspirin.
No, and it feels better, so why wouldn't we keep doing that?
Right. But the body changes over time. And you become more sensitive to things. We have more environmental insults.
Yes.
So
absolutely.
I'm actually a really private person.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't really want to basically, come out with all this information or anything like that, talk about my own life, my struggles in public. But I recognize that we're in a place in world history that we have institutions and situations where people are not given alternatives. We're not told we can actually self-heal. When for millions of years, that's the only thing that humans could do.
Right. Yeah, there was no hospitals or surgical tools or anything like that.
Exactly. So first of all, I want to let people know what you're doing is not your fault. Mm-hmm. You're not just taught by your family. I'm not blaming anyone's mother for coddling them or yelling at them when they were in pain or anything like that. I'm not. I'm upset with the pharmaceutical companies because now I am dealing with people going into opiate withdrawal.
Yeah.
And I go through the dark night of the soul with people. And when they're really, really elderly and they go through this, it's terrible. Simply because the CDC said we're giving people too many opiates, so we got to cut down on that. And they're hurting the population that have been on it for 15, 20 years that don't know other ways to deal with it. And now people have gotten prescriptions that said do yoga. They're bedbound.
Yeah, that doesn't make sense.
I'm like, excuse me?
Yeah.
Okay.
So what do you do for people like that who are in that much pain, that are wrapped up in pharmaceuticals, and they say, Cindy, this is my life. It's been 15 or 20 years. This is what I know. You say there's another way. How, at a high level, what are some of the basic steps or the process that you kind of walk someone through when they're in that state to becoming like you?
Right. So first of all, they have to be willing to learn. Okay. If they want to continue to take pills, right, even if they're being taken off of it, they still want to go down that route. I really can't help them. I've recognized I can't help everyone.
Right. Yeah. Coachability in anything is essential to success. 100% agree.
But if they have a spark of life and they have some purpose that they still need to fulfill in their life, because I meet people a lot of times when they're 70, 80, 90 years old.
And they're not done yet. They're just getting
started. They're not done yet. They got stuff to do. Then I'm willing to say, listen, you've been bedbound. All right. So let's start with a little bit of movement. The human body not only needs oxygen, water, some different types of, nutrition, but it also needs movement.
So is this true for like if they're bedbound, is movement just like even moving their arms? But if they can move pretty well, is it yoga for them? I mean, what's the degree here for?
Well, I start where people are.
Okay.
A lot of times when I meet them, they're, as I said, bedbound and screaming. So if you're there, I give them a slinky.
Got it.
Okay. And a slinky is actually fun.
Mhm.
It makes you smile, but it also gets your hands moving.
Right.
Right. And then I get them to be more easily able to sit up. I get them to put their head, feet over the, bed, and then start to get them to wiggle their toes.
Are they ever scared about taking these steps? Like it'll cause more pain?
Absolutely.
For so long?
They're terrified.
Okay.
And that's what's causing a lot more pain.
Mm.
So all during this, I'm very, I give them a lot of ways to think about it,
Mm-hmm.
a lot of ways to feel safe, right? I'm actually physically there with them.
Right.
As people continue to get better, I can then do what I'm doing right now, talk to them over Zoom or Hangout or whatever.
Yeah.
So that once they've learned some of the practices, they can start to do things on their own.
Got it.
Because what I really want to do is give people back their lives.
Right.
You know? And the unfortunate thing with, Western medicine, this is not really not good with chronic conditions, right?
No, it's not their strength. They perpetuate the pain cycle, not heal it.
Right. 1 in 3 people in America has diabetes, pre-diabetes or diabetes, right?
Right.
I mean, it's unbelievable how many people have 80 or so different autoimmune diseases, right? And that goes from MS to Crohn's to all sorts of different things, arthritis. Yeah. Right.
And a lot of us, from what I hear, helped through like microbiome and probiotics and gut health, which is not. I mean, conventional medicine is starting to study and learn about that, but that's a whole other ballgame in what you're talking about, right? I mean, I've heard about that, but I don't know the nuance and the details of it.
Well, believe it or not, for the most part, if you're eating out of a box, okay, or eating the same foods every day. I met a client and she ate tuna fish every single day. Okay? I helped vary her diet. It made a big difference.
Right, because all the gut bacteria gets enlivened, enriched.
Exactly. So one of the things I say to most people in chronic pain, or basically for anyone to empower their self-healing, is recognize how much processed food has sugar.
Oh yes, it
has salt, it has sugar.
Yeah.
So I'm lucky that I can actually, I'm a gardener, I'm an herbalist, I grow my own food a lot. So I'm able to take care of myself by actually going out and picking my own organic, biodynamic food. Very lucky that way.
That's awesome, yes.
But I also know that I had to set myself in a situation where I could do that.
Yeah, right. You weren't there 20 or 30 years ago. 30 years ago, you were in pain, and that would have been a nightmare for you.
Right. So, but I started to do it while I was in New York City with a balcony, and I grew enough produce basically to keep 6 people going with all the vegetables that they needed. So you don't need a lot of space.
Okay.
The other thing about that is I think there's a lot of therapies that people kind of poo-poo. And one of them is horticultural therapy or nature therapy, walking in the woods or whatever it is.
Right.
Making that connection, people in the spiritual community like to say you need to be grounded. And that's that we're aware that the earth has certain kinds of rhythms. Yeah. And those rhythms actually help us regulate our own body.
I actually do have a grounding mat right here that's plugged into the my wall.
Okay.
Just for that reason, and I got it years ago. I don't think about it, but I know that it's there because I'm behind a computer all the time, that it's, not the next best thing, but it's somewhere down that continuum of better than not having it. So
something came out, it was called earthing.
Yes.
And I was like, I always went barefoot, even in New York City, not necessarily on the pavement, but I would work in community gardens. I would take my shoes off.
Right.
So that has always been an important part of my healing. Another thing that people don't realize is how much sound makes a difference.
Okay.
So where you live, like when I was in New York City and if I had intrusive sounds, it was really difficult.
Mm-hmm.
But I learned a lot about, singing bowls and other things that actually, chanting,
Right.
things that have been used for thousands of years, and it can be any tradition. I mean, I don't really care if you're chanting with the Golden Om or if you're, doing Gregorian chant or some other tradition. To me, it really doesn't matter. What matters is it works for you. It makes you feel better.
Yeah.
So actually listening to music, singing, making music yourself is a wonderful way to, basically help yourself when you're in pain.
Got it.
So a lot of my clients, even when they're in bed, I ask them to hum at least.
Mm.
Because one of the major breakthroughs I did when I was covered, and really shaking from the migraine when I was young,
Yeah.
I started to make a noise. I like hummed a little bit, almost by mistake. And then I said, well, let me try that again. It seemed like something happened.
Right.
And then I basically sang a Christmas carol because I knew the words. It wasn't Christmas, but I did.
Sure.
And it started to make me just relax a little bit.
Mm.
Now, whether it was a relaxation, whether it was the actual tune itself, whatever, all these things make a difference. So having frequencies change when you're in pain actually does make quite a bit of a difference.
Got it. And there's something that's coming up to mind right now that I'm noticing is conventional medicine, when we look at pain, conventional medicine says, you have this one pain, this is the one thing, this is the silver bullet, this will fix it. And when that doesn't work, they go, well, then it must have been this thing. So we'll try that one. And because it's that one, here's your silver bullet. And it's like conventional medicine keeps, if they don't solve it with one thing, they go to the next thing and call it a silver bullet, next thing and call it a silver bullet. And what you're describing is almost like, from a financial perspective, I think of it like compound interest. You try these little things, and one humming plus some relaxation, plus some breathing, plus some water, plus a little bit of movement, it all compounds to, really make an effect. Or musically, someone might think of it as like a symphony. You have the violin, you have the trombone, you have, all these different pieces. And instead of looking at pain from, as I've often thought of it, honestly, myself, is because that's the paradigm I've been taught conventionally. Pain comes from one source. You have your silver bullet. In my case, the silver bullet's been Tylenol. And what you're describing is a totally different way of looking at pain, that instead of trying, at least as I see it, and you can always correct me if I'm not, saying the right thing or whatever, but it's almost like we have all this, whatever the pain is, and it's big, it's unmanageable as we perceive it to be and feel it. And what you're saying is, instead of trying to have a silver bullet where someone says, this one thing fixed my pain and we're good, tapping, people love EFT tapping, and I hear fantastic results about it. But if you talk to a tapper, they'll say that it solves every single thing. And yet some people tap and it doesn't solve everything for them.
Right.
So what it sounds like you're saying is, instead of looking for one silver bullet and saying, well, this one thing will fix pain, it's almost like you're saying, don't look at it in a short term, look at the long-term horizon. You've had pain for 5, 10, 15, 20 years. Don't expect to get rid of it overnight. But what if we can keep reducing it a little bit, day after day, week after week, month after month, until someday you look back like you do and go, I'm pain-free now. So it sounds like that's kind of the paradigm we're looking at here.
Right.
A marathon, not a sprint.
Exactly. And because someone isn't going to basically get out of bed and then run a marathon. Okay?
Yeah, right.
So there's some very popular thing called the spoon theory.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And I'm kind of controversial with the fact that I say, when it comes to fatigue and things like that, people say, I only have 12 spoons today, and I'm only going to be able to, get out of bed and, get to my class, and that's all I'm going to be able to do, and then I'm going to have to go home and be exhausted.
Got it. So
if you decide that
I'm limited.
Right. If you decide that that is your paradigm, that is going to be your paradigm.
Okay.
I guarantee you. Right?
Yeah.
So a lot of times I'm dealing with people that have to get up and go to the bathroom. Okay.
Right.
And I'm like, yay, we're going to get up and go to the bathroom. You know?
But they think that's one spoon.
Right.
Got it.
And the thing is, after time, they realize they're going to be able to not only do that, they'll be able to do, you know, many more things. But it's not something that you can go from 0 to 60,
Got
right?
it.
You're not going to go from, you know, 1 spoon to 70 spoons. But the way that you think, right? This is going back to what your neural pathways are. The more that you can control that, the more you can give yourself positivity. Now, just like, you know, basically tapping, that works for some people.
Right.
Earthing works for other people.
Right.
Art therapy works for some people, right? So I categorize all sorts of different things, and you have to come up with your own individual toolbox, something that speaks to you.
Right.
Something that is going to work.
With like figuring out what their unique pain-free things are, because there isn't really a one-size-fit-all kind of thing.
There is not one size fits all.
Okay.
Because you're in pain for a very different set of history. Your history is different. Your genetics is different. Where you live is different. What you eat is different. What you breathe is different. I mean, many people are in pain because they live in a really polluted society.
Right. So
and they've been exposed
to pain and have a different, like, we both could say my pain hurts right here, 1 inch this way. It's an 8 on a scale of 1 to 10. And what you're saying is they could have totally different ways that they need to go about managing that pain and healing.
Right. Now, there's some similarities. Okay. And what I want people to walk away with is the fact that all pain on some level is the same. It doesn't matter if it's back pain. It doesn't matter if it's you know, migraine pain. It doesn't matter if it's your shoulder. It is simply a signal. But how it manifests, for how long it manifests, right, is what becomes a problem.
Right, and how becoming a chronic problem. You know, I think that's part of, you know, when I think about my body of work, what I find most interesting about you is that it seems like almost, not everything, but a big chunk of what you're talking about is looking at the reality that pain is a habit. And if we want to change the habit of continually being in pain, we need to change the little habits that will allow us to, you know, get away from that one way that we, you know, deal with pain and the one pain habit that we have.
Right.
Not making sense, but. And
recognizing that what you do beforehand make a very big difference. So you start to recognize that you have a certain, you know, way that you bend down to weed, right? And you do this again and again. I have a book coming out, and there's a story in it from, you know, a good friend of mine, and she gave herself really a terrible situation. She dislodged her entire shoulder because she kept weeding in the same way, and she did it for 3 weekends. And she said she was just going to do it because she wanted this done, right? And I'm like, well, why didn't you stop? And she said, no, I had to do it.
Right. Yeah, that's our society. We have to do it. We have to go to work. We have to take care of the family member. Push through it, push through it, push through it.
And I'm just saying that is wrong.
It is. Okay.
And then she said, well, I then, you know, took a painkiller when I went, you know, to work so I could get to work. Because, as I said, she did this over 3 weekends.
Right.
So that simply made her feel okay enough to continue to injure herself.
Right. That's one thing I definitely have talked about in terms of emotional pain and the damage that positive thinking can often do when we only think positively and ignore the negative thoughts, because they're there as a signal. So just like emotional pain has negative thoughts, you're talking about the physical pain. We need to actually say, like, oh, this is telling me something that I need to listen to. Right.
But I also want to tell you that emotional pain is real.
Yeah.
Right? Just like I was saying, the Japanese have decided heartbreak is actually affecting the heart.
Right.
You know, when we get a stomach ache, right? A lot of times we'll get an upset stomach from something that we're thinking about,
Yep.
right? Emotionally upset. So all these domains of the body, right, are all interrelated. So much of what we deal with pain is changing our stress responses. Now, our stress response was really helpful when we were living, in caves and dealing, or on the sea, basically savanna, where you had tigers running around, or lions, or this or that. We had to get away from them.
Right. Is that like fight or flight is what you're referring to?
Right. But it's not that simple.
Okay.
Okay. Everyone says it's fight or flight, but you can freeze.
Right.
Right.
Yep.
You can basically, they're fawn. There's a lot of different reactions. There's 8 or 10 different reactions that we now, have. But all of those go into something that changes our biology. Right. So the first thing that shuts down if we're very upset is our digestion.
Right.
Right. We also shut down our reproductive system.
Yeah, right? I remember when I was going through my dark night of the soul, I couldn't eat. Like, it literally was physically impossible, to the point where the only way I could get food in me was either a smoothie, because it was tricking me into drinking it, or I'd get some almonds and just chew them up until they were mush, and then swallow it like, a supplement or whatever, because I could not eat. Like, I had to force even that little bit into me. So I totally get what you're talking about here.
So that is absolutely useful when we are going to be overcome by a wild animal. Right? The problem is our body doesn't know the difference. When our mind sees a photo of a tiger, an actual tiger, or the thought of a tiger, it's exactly the same response.
Right.
So we're in a society where all sorts of stressors comes up. Our boss walks in the room and we act, right?
Yeah.
Like it's an actual tiger.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
Right? Because he made us upset before.
Right.
So those worn pathways go into the cycles. Okay?
Got it.
So a thought, right? We see something. I'll give you an example. I worked with a client for a few years, and he was getting really great. And so he was starting to exercise in the canyons. And in canyons, a lot of times there are snakes, and he was terrified of snakes, but we went through the whole thing. But anyways, the thing was, he called me up after this happened to him, and he said he had seen a brown snake. He knew that it was not poisonous. He knew it wasn't, but he was running, and he kept running, and he couldn't stop running.
Yeah.
And he was laughing while he was running because he knew that he still had not really changed his pathway, because it made his body, right?
Right. But even in that, he probably changed it a little bit because he was laughing while he was doing it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So what's fascinating is we think that our mind and body are really separated, right? We're taught when we're young, but they're not at all.
Yeah.
And we can control both our mind and our bodies by doing things. And that's what I was saying. The laughter part of it was really fascinating.
Yeah.
Because he knew that he was creating endorphins, right? While he was doing it. So he wasn't scared anymore.
Right.
But he still could not stop from running.
Well, yeah, because
so
there's the whole
dark night of the soul.
Right.
You're not going to be able to get your digestion started again.
Right.
Right? Without basically learning to calm and smooth.
Right. Got it.
Right?
So I'm curious, kind of as we start to wrap up our time together, if there were, maybe 3 or 4 things that someone in pain is experiencing, or someone in pain is having pain, what are like 3 things you would tell them, like just blanket, doesn't matter what the pain is or what it's about? Are there a few things that every person can do to move them down the path towards being pain-free?
Well, what's interesting is if you're having a headache,
right?
What I always suggest to people is notice that, but then pick another pain-free part of your body.
Okay.
and really focus on that.
Okay.
So a lot of times I'll say if a person has a headache, then focus on your feet.
Got
Move
it.
your feet,
Okay.
have your toes, do this and that. I mean, spend a little time with that other part of the body.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Got
And
it.
what's interesting after that, you'll find that it may not be exactly the same level that you come back to.
Got it.
Okay. Okay. So some people call that distraction. I call that refocusing.
Right. Well, also, I mean, you were talking about how much relaxation is important, and that's relaxation, really, bringing in the present moment, being here now.
Right. And a lot of times what we haven't realized is what, preceded that actual pain.
Right.
You say you get headaches maybe from working on your computer too long, right? But do your eyes dry out? Does your nose dry out? Does your mouth dry out, right? Do you feel anything behind your ears? So try to start seeing, okay, am I holding my head differently when I'm, because sometimes I hunch over the computer.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
Right?
I know.
You're hunching.
Yeah.
And, so a lot of times you'll just start to say, okay, what has happened before? Also, what have you eaten?
Got it.
A lot of times people have not necessarily allergies, but they have food sensitivities.
Yeah, I actually had that experience for a long time when I was eating vegetarian, and I would get a really intense pain on my tongue, and I kept, I went to the doctor. He said take lysine. No one seemed to know what it was. It was just assumed that I would live that way. And then when I started eating meat again, the pain went away, and I thought, well, that's weird. It can't just be because I was eating vegetarian. And over the course of the few years as I integrated my diet more fully, I came to realize that there are certain spices that I was putting in all of my vegetarian food when I cooked at home that I wasn't putting in my other foods. And suddenly I was actually pain-free just by not eating those spices. And it was excruciating pain from this food, that I didn't even know what the source was. So I totally get what you're talking about here personally.
Right. So it's not just that, but it's also who is around us.
Okay.
That's another thing that you don't necessarily take into consideration.
Right.
Right. So say that, you have a particular person in your life that you really start to get tense around. Mm-hmm. Okay. So, unfortunately, the first couple times you have to do it while you're in pain. To think back.
Yes. That makes sense.
And kind of like write this down if you can, or do not even write it down, although that helps you memorize things. Just speak it into your phone or whatever other way that you have of recording. Find some way to record all the things that were starting to precede it. Because then you start to really distinguish what your patterns are.
Got it. Because you're trying to break the habits that lead up to the pain.
Right.
Got it.
Okay. So I also really suggest using your hands.
Okay.
A lot of times your hands have been used as healing instruments. Right. Now, one of the things that people don't realize is that you don't have to be some kind of guru or healer or this or that, or be appointed by God or whatever. You can basically, especially if you recognize that pain has a lot to do with your beliefs and the story you tell about your pain.
Got it.
I have the body of a 90-year-old guy told me the other day.
Got it.
He's a surfer. He hurt himself. He's 30 years old. He says, I'm never going to be able to. Well,
he's right.
He's right. He's never going to be able to. And he's going to have the pain of a 90-year-old because that's the story he's told himself.
Right. Okay.
So while you're actually warming your hands, and that's doing it like you were just doing together, right? Yeah. You can tell yourself that you have the ability to heal yourself, that you love yourself, right? These are all positive things. that you're at peace. All right. And say that you have a headache right at the front of your, right. You actually can lay it on, just that. All right. And let yourself know that you're going to be fine. And breathe.
Yeah, I feel more relaxation.
Nose and you're out your mouth, right? And you can do this on any part that has tension. All right. A lot of times we don't realize that, we hold a lot of tension where we are not allowed to speak,
right.
Especially women. We're told your opinions don't matter.
Right.
Right. So you'll have a lot of tension here. There's a lot that you can do. You have knee pain, you can put your hands on that. And you can learn over time that you have energy between your hands.
Right.
Right? After you've done that, it's almost like they start to bounce. So some people say it's a balloon, it's a ball, it's a, however you want to describe it. But what's fascinating is over time, you can learn that you have the strength to actually separate your hands more and more. And it's the fact that the energy between your hands can grow. Yeah. So what's great is you can actually, help other people, right? By putting hands near them. You don't actually have to touch them, right? You can help your children, right? I help a lot of people. I learned Reiki and a lot of other types of quantum touch, etc. But they all basically are using the same thing.
Got it.
We are filled with energy. We have a meridian system that the Chinese discovered 2,000 years ago, however long ago. But it runs through our body. It's an electrical system. That's how we get information from our feet to our brains. We also have what has been described by basically people in the subcontinent, India, as a chakra system outside ourselves.
Right.
Right. And you can say that there's different nodes where the chakra is rooted in. And some people say there's 5, there's 7, there's 12. I mean, on some level, it doesn't really matter, but it's your energy body outside of yourself.
Got it.
And that is actually what you're feeling between your hands, your outside energy body.
Got it.
And that is a healing thing. And it's free. Everybody has it. You don't really, yes, you can, there's lots of special training. I teach people how to do this, but, on some level, I am so ecumenical. I don't care what the tradition is, as long as it works for you.
Exactly. I definitely, have that same belief, my software testing background. It's like, if I do one thing and get a result, honestly, whatever that thing is in between, whatever we want to call it, doesn't really matter. It actually works,
right.
And that's something I really appreciate about you and the way you show up and what you do is that you have looked at what actually works and found a way to take people in really extremely painful situations and help them find freedom, find peace in ways that conventional medicine isn't offering, and yet you're not doing anything outside of the ordinary. I think that's what's almost miraculous about it is you're not doing something out of the ordinary. It's just out of the ordinary for conventional medicine. And they're still trying to catch up on this stuff.
Well, what I have really found is that you can't necessarily help people by deadening things. So I, kind of go through the whole process that people are being treated by conventional, pain groups or,
right.
Pain management. I have a lot of trouble with the idea of pain management because we don't want to manage this. We want to understand it. We want to learn from it. And then we want to let it go.
Right.
So I'm not sure where the management comes in. But anyways,
I love that.
But one of the things that they like to do is to inject people with Botox now.
Right.
Okay. Now, Botox is from botulism, which is, which we're always afraid of as a terrible toxin because it paralyzes. So if you were to take that unknowingly, basically it would paralyze your lungs and you wouldn't be able to actually breathe. And that's one of the terrible side effects of any of the opiates. People don't realize that it actually affects people's breathing. And so they mostly die because they actually can no longer have any respiration. It's not just that it shuts down your digestion, which is terrible. You know, everyone says opiate constipation, but it's not just that. So what's fascinating is, you get injected into your head and you're freezing that quote unquote nerve, but it actually doesn't necessarily make you feel better because then you have numbness there, right? But that's a treatment that they give a lot of people that have terrible, head pain.
Right. So it's the illusion of helping, but really it's, temporary relieving of one symptom, but at the cost of other.
Right. And the long-term, how should I put it, situation may be not helped by the fact that they're regularly injecting you with paralyzing into your brain. I don't know. I mean, I would think that it would kind of disrupt our neural pathways, but maybe I'm wrong. Yeah. Anyways.
Yeah. Right. Well, science will definitely have answers to that over time.
Yeah. Sure. So what I like to do is say that you have a lot more control. Mm-hmm. You can absolutely empower your own self-healing. Mm. Your healing path is going to be somewhat different because the patterns that you have set up through your neural pathway is going to be different than mine.
Right.
But there are ways to change those. You can change your cycles. You can change your biochemistry all by yourself, right? It's not just that people that are yogas for, 30 years are the only ones that can basically change their blood pressure. You can change your own. There's lots of things that we can take control of in our actual bodies, and we can actually heal by using a lot of the things that are available to not just ourselves, but to everyone. And what's wonderful, as so many women are starting to recognize, we can help the next generation if we learn about ourselves.
Yes.
So what I consider is self-care is actually community care. And that is what we need right now.
Yeah.
We need to take care of ourselves. I just think if you're in pain, then you're not going to be able to do so many other things.
Yeah.
So take care of the pain first, get sleep, right? You're going to be in more pain if you're not sleeping.
Oh, that is a whole other topic. I am 100% on board with you. The power of sleep is...
It's healing. It's absolutely vital. So, and when you're in pain, you're not going to sleep as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
So it's unfortunately this, kind of tug of war that goes on that doesn't necessarily have to.
That's a very good point. My health has tremendously improved since I've started taking my sleep seriously. And that's a whole topic worthy of literally another entire conversation. But my reality was, as an entrepreneur and a single full-time father, burning the candle at both ends, waking up early, taking care of my son, working, taking care of my son, working, and then eventually going to bed. I was getting sick, and it wasn't like I was getting like really sick, but I was getting sick frequently, like every few months, in a way that wasn't serving. And I totally didn't really understand how much of what we talked about today was affecting me. The drive, the more mentality, push the pain away, ignore it, Chris, just keep going, too much to do. And it turns out that I get way more done in my life now that I sleep a good night's sleep. So I definitely, will tackle that topic again on another day. For now, though, as we're wrapping up, I just want to say thank you so much for your time today. For everyone who is watching right now, I know there are some real gems in what we shared. And even more importantly, this is just the beginning. of the healing journey of becoming pain-free. So for everyone who's watching, if I understand correctly, you've got a free, I'll put a link below the video, but basically you're going to have a free video that people can get, and also they can apply with you to get a 15-minute pain-free strategy session.
Right.
So that
actually, I'm going to give them a half an hour.
You're awesome.
Because I gotta listen to their story.
Wow, that is a tremendous gift. Thank you so much for that, for your time, and for being the bright light that you are in our world.
Oh, thank you so much, Chris.
Figures.
And thank you for being a bright light also, and continue to grow your wonderful community.
Absolutely. You have an amazing weekend.
Same to you.
Take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye.